Beverly Hills. A sun-drenched practice room hums with quiet ambition. Polished floors, the scent of pressed linen, and the soft tick-tock of a metronome. 8-year-old Lisa Marie Presley sits at an upright piano, fingers poised over ivory keys in a simple schoolgirl dress. Across from her stands the Academy's sternest instructor, arms folded, gaze steely, as she watches Lisa Marie stumble through the exercise. With a curt nod, the teacher cuts the silence. "Miss Presley, let's not pretend a famous name equals talent. I'm here to teach musicians, not celebrity children." A ripple of suppressed laughter echoes off the walls. Lisa Marie's heart clenches, cheeks burning, eyes dropping to the keys. That evening, back at Graceland, she won't retreat into tears. She'll defy every expectation. What she does next will ignite a story no one could have anticipated. The afternoon light slanted through the tall windows of the Beverly Hills Music Academy, slicing the room into bright rectangles against the cool gray carpet. The grand piano's lacquered surface reflected the dusty motes dancing in the shafts of sun. 4 small chairs were arranged in a semicircle, 2 occupied by other students, 1 by an assistant, clutching a metronome, and 1 conspicuously empty until Lisa Marie Presley slipped into it. She wore a simple blouse and skirt, the fabric soft and unadorned, an intentional choice by her mother to keep ballet pink sequins far from this room. At 8 years old, Lisa Marie's fingers curved over the ivory keys with a nervous eagerness. Her teacher, Miss Foster, stood behind her, rigid as a statue in a charcoal dress that matched her stern expression. The assistant tapped the metronome. A steady tick, tick, tick hung in the air. "Begin," Miss Foster commanded, voice cool. Lisa Marie exhaled and pressed down. Her fingers stumbled over the simple exercise in C major, a scale followed by a basic arpeggio. She paused, back straight, head bent, before correcting herself and nudging onward. A few measures in, she slipped again, one wrong note reverberating like a dropped glass. The metronome's ticking seemed to slow, each beat dragging under the weight of sudden tension. Miss Foster's lips tightened. The room's hush was so complete that another student's chair creak sounded like a clap of thunder. The assistant's eyes flicked toward Miss Foster, anticipation flickering. "Miss Presley," the teacher said at last, voice crisp, "let us not pretend that a famous name automatically grants musical ability. I am here to train musicians, not to indulge celebrity children." A ripple of suppressed chuckles chased around the semicircle. Lisa Marie's small shoulders drooped. Her fingers froze on the keys, echoing the brittle silence that followed. The assistant swallowed, lifting a hand to mute the metronome, yet its last tick still echoed. Tears pricked at Lisa Marie's eyes. She clasped her hands in her lap and turned her gaze downward, willing the moment to vanish. She rose without a word and slipped from the room. The doors click closing, the laughter and reproach behind her. That night, the house at Graceland was quiet. Hip-height lamps glowing in the hall, the scent of jasmine drifting through open windows. In the music room, the grand piano sat sentinel beneath a chandelier's muted gleam. Lisa Marie entered alone, her school uniform replaced by pajamas in soft pastels. Within her small palm, she carried the day's hurt, her chest tight with unshed sobs. She perched on the piano bench, fingertips brushing the keys as though seeking comfort. Across the room, the shadowed walls absorbed her presence, framing her in stillness. She lifted her hand and let it fall onto the familiar melody of "Love Me Tender," a song her father had written years earlier. The first notes slipped from her touch, trembling and pure, filling the cavernous room. "Love me tender, love me sweet." Never let me go. Her voice quavered at never, each word a hesitant confession. The notes wrapped around her like a blanket, the piano's resonance softening the emptiness. She paused before the next line, closed her eyes, and resumed, "You have made my life complete, and I love you so." At the lyric, "I love you so," her voice cracked with emotion. The tears she had held back spilled over as she pressed on through the verse, each chord a lifeline cast in her father's direction. The chandelier's crystal prisms quivered with the vibration, and the room sighed with the weight of her confession. Behind her, the door opened without a sound. Elvis Presley stood in the archway, the tailoring of his robe folding around him like a cloak of midnight. The silver in his hair glinted under the chandelier's glow, and the world outside, the glare of Las Vegas lights, the roar of adoring crowds, seemed distant, irrelevant. He paused, eyes soft with something more potent than concern. Without a word, he crossed to the piano and sat at her side, hands folded quietly in his lap. The emptiness between them was charged, as if her melody had summoned him through memory and blood. Lisa Marie, cheeks wet and fingers poised above the keys, hesitated. Then she let her hands rest, and the song faded into a gentle echo. Elvis's gaze rested on her small hands. Still without speaking, he reached forward and laid his fingers atop hers, pressing lightly. His presence was a bridge between the lesson's cruelty and this moment of grace. He did not chide her, nor did he offer empty praise. He simply sat, a steadfast sentinel in the hush. Slowly, she turned her head and met his eyes. In that look was an unspoken affirmation. Her worth was not measured by scales or arpeggios, but by the strength in her voice and the courage in her heart. He squeezed her hand once, and without exchanging any words, they shared a silent communion more eloquent than any declaration. Outside, the jasmine-scented breeze drifted through the open windows, carrying with it the promise of a new dawn. In the dim lamplight of Graceland's music room, Lisa Marie Presley discovered a truth no teacher could ever erase: that beneath every faltering note lies the seed of voice, and that voice, when embraced, can transcend the harshest judgment. The following morning, the sun rose over Graceland in muted gold, tracing lazy patterns across the Mississippi mudroom where Elvis made coffee and Lisa Marie slept in late. He found her curled beneath her quilt, eyelashes still dusted with yesterday's tears, and knelt beside the bed. "Hey, pumpkin," he whispered. She blinked awake, voice small. "I feel strange." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Take the day off school. I'll get you some hot soup." He slipped from the room, closing the door on hushed worry rather than reprimand. By mid-morning, instead of the chauffeur waiting outside Lisa Marie's school, a dark green Cadillac idled at the curb. She climbed into the back seat, forehead pressed against the cool glass, watching palm trees shimmer past. Elvis sat beside her in the front, eyes hidden behind aviators. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "We're going to Memphis for a couple days. No lessons, no guests, just us." Relief flooded her features. She had dreaded returning to the Hilltop Music Academy in Beverly Hills, where Miss Foster's sharp critique still stung. Now, the road ahead promised refuge in her father's old home, the house where every note carried the warmth of family, not the cold judgment of critics. They arrived at dusk. The Graceland facade glowed softly under the lampposts, and the magnolia trees stood guard like silent sentinels. Elvis drove his daughter straight to the music room, its French windows thrown open to the humid air and distant train whistles. He produced a leather-bound cassette case, yellowed with age. "I want you to hear something," he said, eyes gentle. She slid open the lid to reveal a single tape labeled in spidery script. "Unchained Melody, Draft Take 1966. With precise fingers, he threaded it into the ancient Ampex deck. The reels clicked to life, and through the speakers came the distant ache of his younger voice, hungry, raw, and slightly off-pitch in places. "This was me, days after I first tried it," he explained. "I cut a version for the band, but it felt fake, too polished. I kept it because sometimes false notes show you what's real." The melody swelled, each tremulous phrase a map of emotion rather than a guide to perfection. Lisa Marie closed her eyes, absorbing every flaw and hesitation. She felt her own doubts begin to uncoil. Here was her father, vulnerable, sharing his unfinished work as proof that even legends wrestled with their art. When the tape ended, she looked up, damp-eyed. "It sounds human," Elvis nodded. "Music's most honest when you let the cracks show." That evening, she perched at the same piano she'd fled the day before, the ivory keys cool beneath her fingertips. The cassette's impression hovered in her mind. The phrasing, the pauses, the way imperfection lent weight. She began to play Unchained Melody, verse by verse, deliberately echoing the tentative contour of his voice. At first her hands trembled, accuracy resting with hearted expression, but gradually she surrendered to its flow, each chord unlocking something steadier within her. Unbeknownst to her, Elvis sat in the dim corner, arms crossed, watching the flame of her concentration. The chandelier's crystals gleamed like scattered tears, and the southern breeze carried the scent of honeysuckle through open windows. He rose silently and moved to the piano bench, seating himself beside her without disrupting the momentum. She reached the chorus's height. "My love, my darling, I've hungered for your touch," and a fresh wave of emotion broke in her chest. Her right hand wavered, but at that moment, her father's other hand settled atop hers, gently guiding the flourish into the next bar. She glanced at him, heart pounding in recognition of his presence not as critic, but companion. When the final refrain faded, the silence felt sacred. Lisa Marie turned to face Elvis, breath fluttering. "Dad, I did it," he smiled, eyes shimmering behind those aviators. "Yes, you did," he said, voice hushed. Together. They sat side by side, two generations linked by shared melody, the tape's ghosts and her newfound confidence weaving a bridge across decades. In the hush of Graceland's music room, without fanfare or spotlight, father and daughter had discovered a truth no recital hall could impart, that talent lives not in flawless execution, but in the courage to own every note, perfect or not, and to let the music of one's heart be the final judge. The Veterans Hall in Memphis was nothing like the glittering showroom at the Hilton. Its walls were unadorned brick painted a tired shade of beige, and folding chairs were set in neat rows facing a small dais. A single upright piano sat stage center, its varnish dulled by countless recitals and Sunday school sing-alongs. Above the stage hung a banner reading, "Welcome Home, Brothers and Sisters," its letters slightly askew. A battered American flag stood in the corner, the stars faded but still proud. 40 people filled the seats. Gray-haired soldiers in crisp uniforms, nurses in pastel dresses, a handful of school children clutching programs. No cameras glared, no reporters hustled. This was a private benefit, an evening of remembrance and gratitude for those who had served, away from the spotlight's glare. Backstage, Elvis Presley paused a moment before stepping into the soft glow of the overhead floodlights. He wore a simple dark shirt and trousers. No sequins, no cape. Just a man among friends. In his hand he held a single sheet of paper. Edges creased where he had folded it. Tonight, he had decided, there would be no grand vocal entrance, no booming announcer's voice. Instead, he would offer one musician the chance to speak through her own gift. As the opening chords of My Way faded from the piano, Elvis cleared his throat and tapped the mic stand. The hush that followed felt like a held breath. He unfolded the note, eyes sweeping over the gathering. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice warm but firm, "tonight we have one musician among us who was told she lacks talent just because of a name." A faint murmur rippled through the crowd. "I disagree. If you'll indulge me, I'd like you to hear her for yourselves." A single chair was dragged to the front, and all gazes swung toward a slender figure in the back row, 8-year-old Lisa Marie Presley. She wore a pastel dress, simple and soft, her curls framing a face pale with nervous anticipation. The older veterans in the front leaned forward, curious. Behind her, nurses exchanged glances, hands clasped as though in prayer. Elvis smiled, gentle, encouraging, and held out his hand. Lisa Marie stood slowly, knees trembling, and crossed the narrow stage. Each step echoed against the hardwood floor. When she reached the piano, she paused, fingers hovering above the keys for a heartbeat that stretched into eternity. The hall was deathly quiet, save for the soft whisper of breath. Lisa Marie seated herself, her small fingers finding middle C. Then she began to play Love Me Tender, note by careful note, her touch tentative at first, but growing in confidence. Love me tender, love me sweet. Each chord resonated in the stillness, the worn wood panels absorbing every vibration. As Lisa Marie's hands moved, the melody emerged, pure, unembellished, suffused with a child's earnestness. There was no glittering arrangement, no backing singers, just a girl and her heart on the keys. A woman near the front dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. A veteran in uniform closed his eyes, head tilted back as though he were listening to a hymn. The metronome tick from earlier recitals was nowhere to be heard. Only the living cadence of the piano mattered now. Elvis remained at the edge of the stage, body still, his fingertips brushing the mic stand as though steadying himself. He did not sing. He did not conduct. He simply watched, pride softening his gaze. As the final notes of the verse fell away, Lisa Marie lifted her head. Her cheeks were damp, but her eyes shone. She collapsed onto the piano bench, breath caught in her throat. Elvis stepped onto the stage and knelt beside her. He placed a hand on her shoulder, warmth radiating through the thin fabric of her dress. The hush deepened, a shared reverence between performer and audience. "That," he said quietly, voice carrying through the hall, "is music." He pressed his hand gently against her back. "Everything else is just people's opinions, and none of that matters." A long moment passed before the crowd rose slowly, first on trembling legs, then in a ripple that became a tide of applause. But even the clapping sounded muted compared to the intimate truth they had witnessed. Talent expressed not for fame, but for honest expression. Lisa Marie slid from the bench as the ovation waned, her father holding her gaze. She nodded, a small smile breaking across her face, an affirmation she had earned by simply being herself. Elvis lifted her hand and guided her off stage, his own heart buoyed by the triumph of her song. In the quiet aftermath, among those worn veterans and gentle caregivers, a little girl had spoken through music. And in that unplanned scene, she had found her voice. That evening's warmth had faded from the Veterans Hall by the time the last guest drifted away. Folding chairs scraped as the few remaining volunteers stacked them against the unadorned brick walls. The banner reading "Welcome Home" swayed slightly in the faint draft from the open doors. A battered upright piano stood silent on the small dais, its keys now cold and still. No cameras had been rolling during the benefit. Elvis had insisted on an unbroadcast, intimate evening. Yet, as the last of the audience departed, a quiet scurry of footsteps echoed behind the stage curtain. Hidden in the gloom, a young sound technician who had quietly slipped in as a guest retrieved a compact, battery-powered tape recorder from beneath a stack of folding chairs. Curiosity and reverence had driven him to place the recorder on a nearby stool, aimed exactly at the piano's strings and the microphone stand where Elvis had knelt. He hit record just before the final ovation swelled, then returned backstage to help sweep the floor, leaving no trace of the device. Days later, the hush of Grace Land's family library was punctuated by the gentle click of a cassette being inserted into an ancient Ampex deck. Elvis sat alone at the mahogany desk, head bowed beneath the soft glow of a single banker's lamp. The recording, sealed in an unmarked envelope, lay in his hand, the label reading only, "Memphis, Veterans Benefit, Unplugged." He pressed play. The tape hissed to life, followed by the distant rustle of veterans shifting in their seats. A man's voice, unmistakably Elvis's, broke the quiet. "I want you all to meet a musician who was told she doesn't belong." "I disagree. Please, welcome Lisa Marie Presley." Applause filled the hall once more, but it was remote now, as though heard down a long corridor. Then came the soft scuff of small feet and the tender, tentative touch of a child's fingers on piano keys. The melody of "Love Me Tender" emerged, unadorned, pure. Lisa Marie's voice trembled, then steadied. "Love me tender, love me sweet." Elvis closed his eyes at the desk, the low lamp casting deep shadows around the room. The fragile beauty of that performance, her pauses, her courage, filled him with a father's pride and a musician's awe. When her final note faded, he heard only silence, the tape's gentle hum, and the low echo of his daughter's heart, reaching out through the recording. When the tape ended, Elvis sat motionless, letting the silence settle like velvet around him. Then, with deliberate calm, he paused the deck and rose. In the next room, the safe stood as a silent guardian of family secrets. He carried the cassette envelope and tucked it inside, alongside the heirloom jewelry and old letters, a testament to unfiltered truth. A week later, an unassuming package arrived at the Beverly Hills Academy of Music. It bore no return address, only the inscription, "To Ms. Miriam Foster, Piano Department." Inside was the taped cassette of that night in Memphis. No note, no explanation, only the recorder's gentle hum and the unedited performance of a little girl's resilience. Back in Los Angeles, Ms. Foster found herself alone in her empty classroom, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the upright piano she polished each week. Curiosity tugged at her as she slid the cassette into the portable deck she kept under her desk. The red rec light blinked on. She listened. Her stern posture softened with the first few bars of Lisa Marie's playing. The purity of the child's melody, the subtle inflections, the unwavering courage in each keystroke. It spoke of a talent untainted by celebrity, born of heart rather than name. When the applause swelled and Elvis's voice tenderly introduced his daughter, She felt a gentle sting of regret, as though her own words had echoed in that distant hall. When the tape clicked off, Ms. Foster sat in silence, the old metronome on her desk eerily still. She realized that the lesson she'd intended to teach had been overshadowed by a far more profound one, that true musicianship transcends pedigree and demands humility. She tucked the cassette into her jacket pocket, heart lit by the quiet power of that child's performance. The next morning, when Lisa Marie entered the bright, echoing practice room, Ms. Foster greeted her with an uncharacteristic warmth. "Miss Presley," she said softly, "would you play something for me today?" Lisa Marie, puzzled but hopeful, approached the piano. As her fingers found the keys of "Love Me Tender," Ms. Foster closed her eyes, listening not as a judge but as a fellow musician moved by an innocent, undeniable truth. The first lesson after Miss Foster received the mysterious cassette felt different from the moment Lisa Marie slipped through the polished double doors. The Academy's corridors, once a gauntlet of hush and stiff-necked peers, seemed softer, as though the marble floors had absorbed some secret warmth. Sunlight slanted through the tall windows of the practice room, illuminating the dust motes like drifting gold. The silence settled over the grand piano more gently than usual, and the echo of distant metronomes felt less insistent. Lisa Marie perched on the piano bench, clutching her sheet music folder to her chest. Across from her, Miss Foster, whose tailored skirt and precise bun bespoke unshakable control, hovered by the music stand, arms crossed. Yesterday's rigidity had softened into something subtler, a cool reserve edged with curiosity. The other two students and the assistant waited behind the veil of expectation the teacher had woven over years of lessons. "Today," Miss Foster announced, voice measured, "I want you to play something not in your assigned repertoire. Choose whatever you wish." Her gaze held Lisa Marie's. No disdain now, only a challenge. Lisa Marie's heart fluttered. The request sounded simple, but every fiber in her being tasted its weight. This was no longer a drill in technique. It was an invitation to share her own voice. She opened her folder, rifling through pages, until a battered photocopy slid into view. The draft of Unchained Melody she and her father had studied together in Graceland. She pulled it out, smoothing the creases with trembling fingers. "May I?" she whispered. Miss Foster inclined her head. "Go ahead." Taking a deep breath, Lisa Marie positioned her small hands on the ivory keys. The first arpeggio rolled out slowly, the notes clear and uncluttered. The room held its breath, obedient to the melody's draw. She continued bar by bar, careful yet free, attuned to every rise and fall in the familiar tune. "Oh, my love, my darling, I've hungered for your touch." With each chord, Lisa Marie's confidence swelled. The teaching room's hard edges softened in the glow of her playing. Behind her, she sensed Miss Foster leaning forward, eyebrows lifted in surprise. The assistant exchanged a glance with a fellow student, mouths parted as though to whisper praise. As Lisa Marie reached the chorus, her small frame relaxed, and she let the notes flow without hesitation. The last tender cadence trembled into a hush, and for a heartbeat, the only sound was her steady breathing. Miss Foster stepped forward, hand poised above the music stand, as though to erase the past. Instead, she gently laid a finger on the score pages. "That was intuitive," she said, voice so soft it echoed. "Music isn't just measured in scales and metronomes. It lives in the spaces between, the heartbeats, the choices, the feeling you bring to each note." Lisa Marie lifted her eyes, disbelief and relief mingling in their depths. The other students watched, silent and wide-eyed. The assistant dabbed at her throat, as though her own voice had tightened. Miss Foster straightened, nodding slightly. "Thank you," she murmured. "You may pack up for today." After the lesson, Lisa Marie gathered her things, her heart still fluttered with the aftermath of praise. A strange new warmth beneath her skin. She zipped her folder shut and slid it into her backpack. As she turned to leave, her fingers brushed against a small roll tucked into the outer pocket, one she did not remember inserting. She paused in the hallway, unzipped the pocket, and withdrew the bundle. Unfurling it, revealed a yellowed photocopy. The sheet music for Love Me Tender, annotated in brisk cursive. In the margin, a single line. "Do not stop." Her breath hitched. A slow smile unfurled across her face. The tape had done its work, not to punish, but to restore truth. Miss Foster's silent shift now spoke louder than any apology. Lisa Marie stood in the sunlit corridor, cradling the sheet music like a talisman. The walls around her, once cold and indifferent, seemed to pulse with possibility. She knew then that every note she played would carry the echo of this moment, a testament to resilience, a quiet victory over doubt. Outside, the palm fronds swayed against the blue California sky, and in that breath of warmth and light, Lisa Marie Presley carried forward not as the daughter of a legend, but as a musician empowered by her own voice, ready to play on, guided not by fame or technique, but by the unyielding truth that some melodies must be heard to be believed. The late afternoon sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the recording studio, casting long, lazy shadows across a polished hardwood floor. Outside, a faint breeze stirred the palm fronds lining the street, but within, every breath seemed suspended. Lisa Marie Presley sat on a worn leather couch, her legs crossed, a single spotlight illuminating the small stack of prepared questions resting on the coffee table before her. Across from her, the veteran music journalist cleared his throat, camera lights poised, and leaned forward. "Lisa Marie," he began, voice warm but direct. "You come from a lineage that's defined generations of music lovers. Yet for years, we heard little of your own recordings. What held you back?" She inhaled slowly, the curve of her lips softening as she considered the question. Behind her dark sunglasses, her eyes flickered with memory. "I used to believe I didn't have the right," she said, voice steady. "I thought I had to be perfect. No wrong notes, no hesitation, no cracks in the performance, like those red corrections in a music workbook, marking anything less than flawless." A hush fell over the room as the journalist jotted notes. Lisa Marie leaned back, her posture both relaxed and poised, the weight of decades resting in her calm expression. "I feared that any imperfection would not only betray me, but also tarnish my father's legacy. So I stayed silent, practicing endlessly, but never sharing." He nodded, encouraging yet respectful. "When did that change?" She paused, and the light caught a memory in her eyes. "It was the night in Memphis," she said quietly, her first public admission. "A small benefit for veterans, acoustic format. My father invited me to play after someone said I lacked talent simply because of my name. I sat at that old upright piano and let my hands speak. There was no glare of spotlights, no televised broadcast, just the gentle hum of the room and the ears of 40 people. For the first time, I realized the truth, that music lives in the heart, not in perfection." The journalist allowed the silence to stretch, honoring her candor. Then he leaned forward. "That evening changed everything?" She smiled, a gentle curve tinged with bittersweet reflection. It showed me that my voice mattered, even if it cracked or faltered. It taught me that courage isn't about flawless execution. It's about daring to share your truth, no matter the risk. He clicked off his recorder, but the cameras continued rolling. Is there anything you'd like to share with your fans now? She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them with quiet resolve. Yes, I recorded an acoustic version of Love Me Tender at home, using the very sheet music annotated by my teacher all those years ago, because it wasn't about proving anything to anyone but myself. I've made it available on YouTube as simply and honestly as I could. A beat of anticipation followed. The journalist rose and approached a nearby monitor, cued the video, and pressed play. The screen filled with a home video shot. Lisa Marie at a baby grand piano in her living room, sunlight dappling the keys. She began to play, each chord resonant with the gentle intimacy of someone speaking directly into your ear. Love me tender, love me sweet, never let me go. Her voice was unguarded, each syllable carrying the weight of her journey, from hesitant child to woman reclaiming her own melody. As the final notes faded, the camera panned to her face, eyes closed, the faintest tremor in her smile. The studio audience exhaled in unison. The journalist returned to his seat, voice hushed in awe. Beautiful, he whispered. Over the next hour, they discussed the video's impact. The comments flooding in, messages of solidarity from fellow musicians, encouragement from listeners who had felt silenced in their own talents. Then the journalist's eyes widened as he scrolled. Listen to this, he said, reading aloud. Finally, MF. Lisa Marie's gaze softened at those initials. MF, she murmured. Miss Foster, her childhood teacher whose harsh critique had driven her to doubt. The single emoji and one-word message carried the weight of decades, an overdue affirmation that resonated like the sweetest chord. She turned back to the cameras, voice gentle but clear. That comment, it wasn't just a note on a video. It was a reminder that every story of humiliation carries within it the seed of new strength, if we don't stay silent. It took me many years, but I'm grateful for the journey, for every wrong note that taught me more about who I am than any perfect performance ever could. The journalist offered a final question. Any last words for those still finding their voice? Lisa Marie leaned forward, eyes bright. Remember, some scenes never make the footage. They dwell deep within us, shaped by scars and quiet triumphs. And it's those scenes, the ones played in the hush, that echo when the world falls silent. With that, the interview concluded. Cameras cut, lights dimmed. Yet the hush that followed carried her truth onward, a living testament to a journey from self-doubt to self-discovery, and the enduring power of a single melody to change one's life forever.